I feel that comes close to being balanced and fair. And so I'm going to support this motion, though it's a little higher cost than I had expected it to be, but I will be supporting the motion.
I have received many emails, and today we got another 739 emails. Most of these emails tell us to reject the entire contract. And people say that we should not allow our employees to strike, we should privatize this organization, all sorts of issues like that. I want to start out by saying this is a collective bargaining state, and if people who are emailing me do not want another strike, they need to talk to their legislators. It's not within the board's purview to do that. We don't want a strike. I know our employees really don't want a strike. But it is something that's up to the state legislature, not this board. And I might remind people, we are a collective bargaining state, and even if we privatize this, employees have the right to organize, and they could still be unionized. So I just want to lay that out there for these 739 people who emailed us today, not counting all the rest of them. But I also am in favor of ratifying this contract minus the offending section 4.8 because I recognize that our employees for 4 years had zero contributions or zero salary increases. For 4 years, they took zero salary increase. One of the employees today mentioned that they gave up $100 million in give-backs because we were in the middle of a recession. They stood up and they acted that way. They acted in favor of keeping this system going. This contract now gives them a 2% raise each year for 4 years. That's very much in line with all the rest of the contracts that are being negotiated at this point in time. That is when we're hopefully going through a recovery. And so I feel that it's not an outrageous thing to give our employees who gave up any raise for 4 years to give them a 2% raise for the next 4 years. We have one of the highest riderships in the history of BART over this period of time. And we have the oldest cars in the nation. And our employees kept this system going. They're very skilled workers, and they are the reason that we're able to keep 40-year-old cars patched together and have the highest ridership that we've ever had and have a 95% on-time performance. That's a very commendable record, and it's commendable of our employees to be able to do that. I take a different view than my young colleague. He says he's young and looking out in the next 60 years. So am I. But I'm looking at it from an older person's perspective, looking out into those 60 years. For 40 years, BART gave retirees health care after only 5 years of being here. Our union stepped up and agreed that that wasn't sustainable. And so now we've changed it so that it ramps up to 15 years before a retiree can get long-term medical. That's one of the things, this issue of long-term medical costs for retirees, that's breaking our nation. We've seen it in Detroit, we've seen it in Stockton, we've seen it in many places, and we needed to change that. This contract changes that. It will save millions of dollars for the long term. So it's a change after 40 years that will go forward for the next 40 years that will be much more sustainable than we've ever had in the previous 40 years. We also, in this contract, got work rule changes. Those will lead to better attendance. That will save the taxpayers money because the system will become more efficient in our work rules. We'll be able to show how we can schedule people more efficiently with these work rule changes. We also got, and it will lead to less overtime, which is a big cost in our budget. We also got changes that allow us to put in technology. we know for many, many years now, we've had new technologies, but we've not been able to take advantage of them. Our union saw that this was an issue, and we saw that it was an issue, and we've agreed that now we have a new process where we can take advantage of new technology, and this is something that is extremely important for those new cars that we're getting that will be full of new technology. So to say that this contract is not a good contract is wrong. It does reward employees for taking those 0% for 4 years and rewards them for the good work that they're done. But it also rewards the taxpayers and the riders because they're going to get long-term changes to this contract that will pay off with millions of dollars over those 60 years that Director Millay is talking about. They're changes that were very difficult to get and were resisted over the years, and we finally come to agreement on those changes. I think the editorials and some of the media comments that have focused just on some of the other issues in this are very myopic because they do not take into account the groundbreaking measures that we've gotten in this contract. We are, through this contract, bringing greater sustainability to the Bay Area. I believe that we should have this contract because I don't want any more strikes, and I think that the Bay Area economy would suffer if we hadn't come to this agreement. If we kept pushing, and they kept pushing back, we would have more problems with the Bay Area economy, and everybody would suffer, the riders, the taxpayers, and all those people who have to commute. So I cannot agree that we should have Section 4.8 in. I do believe it was a mistake, but at any rate, it's nothing that the board ever agreed to. It was never brought to the board because it was never considered by the district as something that we were going to consider. We weren't going to consider another 6 weeks of paid leave. And so we never talked about it. So we don't really have a contract with us, and it was not a promise I made because I learned about it in November. We thought it was gone by the boards. So it's not something I can accept now. It wasn't negotiated, it was never discussed with me. But I can agree to the rest of the contract, and I do agree to the rest of the contract because I think it's fair to both our employees and it's fair to our riders. And so I will support it with that section deleted.
Thank you, President Razulovich. And I think the two directors to my right, Director Murray and Director Blaylock, have stated, I think, my position on these negotiations. We're probably paying more for this than we anticipated we would pay for it. And I think that labor is probably giving up more than they anticipated they would give up as when these negotiations began. And that's the nature of collective bargaining and these negotiated settlements. People have to give a little bit to get where they want to go. So would I have preferred that this contract came in costing the district less than $67 million? Yes, I would have. Would I have preferred that we could have gotten more rule changes that would allow this district to be more sustainable, work more efficiently, and provide a higher quality of product? Yes, I would have been happy if that had occurred. But we didn't get everything we wanted, and labor didn't get everything we wanted. This is a fair and equitable contract for our employees, in my opinion. It's affordable and it's sustainable for our riders and the taxpayers. And that's the sweet spot that I was hoping we would end up in when we started this painful process back in April. You know, we ended on a sloppy note, and that's regrettable. This turmoil that we're discussing now could have and should have been avoidable, but it occurred. Assuming that I am the president in December, it's my intent to appoint a board committee to review the labor negotiation process from the TAs through the final matter that comes before the board. These TAs, which we've reviewed, are difficult to determine when they were agreed upon, They're difficult to determine whether, in fact, the signature page is associated with the main page. I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything wrong. I see some faces in the audience, but I'm not accusing of anything. A mistake occurred, and my effort in talking about creating a board committee, working with staff, is so in the future we don't have these mistakes. I would rather end on a high note rather than a low note, which is where we are today. For the last few weeks, we've been stuck in the red zone, if I can use a football analogy. We have to find a way to get into the end zone. And what was, if this motion is adopted by the board today, it's a pathway into the end zone. And I hope we all are able to follow that path.
At the beginning of this negotiation, it was clear that to have parity with the rest of the country and the transit agencies and public agencies, and just the state of the economy in our times, that it was reasonable for BART to be in a position where, like everyone else, we end up contributing to both medical as well as pension. Having said that, the union's positions have basically been, well, this is going to be an additional burden, and through the negotiation process, what has occurred is that we were invited to give them, the unions, a high enough increase in percentage to pick up the tab for it. So basically, all we have really done is give the unions continue to pay for the pension and the medical by virtue of a pay raise, and then a 2% per year for 4 years pay raise on top of that, so that the total amount of monies are going out. Despite whether the unions are saying 2% per year or we're saying the district is saying 15+%, it still comes out to 67 million plus per year. That's, I consider to be more than fair and equitable, and it was more than the district had expected to be able to contribute. But by virtue of the fact that both sides agreed with that, fair and equitable, and we go along with that. The issue with family leave, as we end up seeing it right now as being whether it be a molehill or a speed bump or a brick wall, it seems to be a brick wall that's holding up this contract. And with the proposal that is on the board from Director Keller at this time, that puts us in a position where we can end up going forward. I am pained by the fact that we have put ourselves in such adversarial positions against one another. The fact that we have lost the lives of 2 valued employees, our brothers and our sisters, or our brothers that we end up being part of our family, and everything else that has gone on in the discussions that have been going on in the press and to the public, and the reactions that the public has been subjecting the employees to. All of this is regrettable. I see this as a step forward in a positive light, and I'm going to end up supporting it.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes, I will say a few words also. I had a whole speech planned out, but I think it needs to change so much that
use your microphone.
I would like to just maybe talk a little bit from the heart here. I hear some of the directors come up and down. To me, this is a very complicated situation. I hear a lot of directors, the districts say it was a mistake. Yes, it was a mistake, but to me, nobody has come forward and said, you know what, there was a mistake, I'm responsible. I signed the paper, I'm responsible. Nobody has done that. And for whatever reason, and I don't know what the reason is, everyone just says it was a mistake. Yes, there was a mistake, but at the end of the day, somebody has to step up and say, I'm responsible. I've not seen that so far. I'm very, very disappointed. I think that has contributed so much to the rancor between BART and labor. I tried to go for a delay, because I've always believed in my world that the more you talk, the better it is. And I'm not even sure why we are not continuing discussions, but that was kind of voted down and or not really given much attention. And so I understand that alternative is out. However, on the other hand, I do think that the district does need some sort of direction to go forward. We had talked about rejecting a contract. We are not rejecting a contract today. We are actually approving a contract. And so one of the things I have been able to, I believe, extrapolate from this board is that ultimately the people who signed this and the responsible ones must be held in account. This cannot be forward at the last moment. You know, everything that has gone on with this labor negotiation, everything, every bit of management advice we have received, candidly, has not worked out to the district's best interest, in my humble opinion. Everything. And the topper, of course, was this last 4.8, which is a mess. But I do believe that the contract itself is still very important. And so what we are doing here today is approving that contract. It is a plus for the district to go forward. Hopefully, members throughout the Bay Area, our employees will look at it as a plus. Obviously, if they don't, we'll have to figure that out later. But I think the important thing for me to say today is this is an affirmative vote for the contract. This is not mercifully not rejecting the contract, which I find a sharp distinction. So, having said that, I'm looking forward to how we, as Vice President Keller has said, and as President Radulovich has, I believe, agreed to, but in the conversation we didn't have it one vote. You know, the key here to me is how do we hold the people who made this mistake, put the district in the Bay Area in this kind of position, how do we hold them accountable? I think that is so critical. And I'm hoping, as we have already discussed, we have a board meeting by 3 directors that want to examine this situation very closely, maybe within the next week. So I'm looking forward to that also. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Penn. Director Rayland?
Thank you, Chair. And I welcome the opportunity to share my own reasons for approving this motion. And I go back to this November 2nd. I was at the Dia de los Muertos celebration on the morning, and I learned that morning as I was about to go up on the stage with Congresswoman Barbara Lee that ATU had approved the contract. I was excited, and I shared that excitement with the public immediately. And the reasons I was in favor of the contract at that time was it represented a fair offer for our workers. As well, it contained costs to allow the district to move forward with the purchase of additional cars and improvements that we desperately need to better serve our passengers. It was later, of course, that I learned that there was an error in the inclusion of section 4.8. When I review how that section came about, I don't think I'm yet very clear on how it arrived, and it hasn't been accounted for by anybody in the district that's standing up and saying, I'm responsible, but we do know that it came from the district. However, reviewing the entire chronology, I found it very compelling to see that 4.8 was not something that had been negotiated. In fact, to get to this point today, we've gone through 7 difficult months of negotiation, and over the past 4 months, there has been no negotiation, no discussion of family medical leave. It would be unfair to include that now. Both parties agreed upon a $67 million package. And I believe that we must keep that package intact, there. I think that's what the employees voted on. It's what the directors voted on. It's what the public was told we were offering. And so our offer today helps us move to the next step and build a stronger district that can better serve the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Saltzman?
From the beginning of this negotiating process, my goal has been to reach a contract that's fair for BART workers, BART riders, and the BART taxpayers. And I think this motion moves us towards that. The employees here at BART work very hard, and I feel honored that I got to experience this just for one night earlier this year when I went with SEIU on a walk-a-day and cleaned the cars with them at the end of one evening. It was very hard work. It was definitely not easy, so I really respect the work that BART employees do. And I also respect that in the last contract in 2009, when we were in even tougher economic times here at BART, the employees really did give back quite a bit. So this has been at the back of my mind through the whole negotiation process. So I think it's important that this contract that we could be reaching would give them a fair raise. And at the same time, it allows the district to be sustainable. I think my colleagues have covered some of the efficiencies that would be gained through this contract. And it allows us to continue focusing on our state of good repair priorities. So I think it has a really good balance. What happened with 4.8 is very unfortunate, and I want to make sure something like this never happens again. I appreciate the proposal of Director Keller to have a committee to explore our whole negotiating process. In my first year on the board, there was a lot I learned through all of this, but I know as we get caught up in the next issues next year, it's sometimes easy to forget, and I want to make sure that we have an official process to make sure that the lessons learned aren't forgotten, that we make sure the next negotiating process overall is much better, not just with this one situation. So I'm going to support this motion, and I hope we can move forward together, the district, the unions, management, the board, to make sure we can move forward, implement this contract, and have a better working relationship in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Saltzman. Comments from the director? Yes.
In closing, I basically wanted to put kind of a capstone on my previous remarks. And that is that at the beginning of the negotiations, I was challenged both by the press as well as my constituents as to how this negotiation was going to go and how much money that we were willing to end up giving the BART employees. And it was always thrown up that we have some of the highest paid kinds of workers in the nation. And I found it very easy to basically support the position of the unions by virtue of the fact that our unions end up doing the heavy lifting. They end up providing the service to the public with the percentage of the fleet that we have on the tracks every day, and with the reductions that we have had in staff over years, and they earned that. I lost the ability to support that when we ended up having 2 strikes. Because when we're already the highest paid, or one of the highest paid transit agencies in the entire nation, and then we strike on top of that, how do I defend that? I haven't figured out how to do that yet. And with the package that we have right now, with 15% pay raise plus and $67 million, I think that this is a very generous improvement for the position that the union thank you. And portions of that, of course, are being reflected in the sacrifices that the union has made with the last contract, with the no raises that they ended up accepting, as well as the contributions and work rules they made. And for that, we're deeply, deeply grateful, because when we take a look at all the rest of the transit agencies in the entire Bay Area, everyone went into the red except for BART. And we couldn't have done that without the contributions of our partners and employees. But it's time to get this thing finished. So I'm supporting. Thank you.
Department, any other director comments? Very good. There's been a motion and a second. Colleagues, please vote.
Motion passes. 8 yes, 1 no. Director Malay voting no. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Then we're on to the administration items.
What about the PI? Am I going to vote on the PI?
That was the vote.
No, it was not. Up or down, yes or no?
TA.
Yeah. Could you read the motion?
You reread the motion.
Would you like me to read?
Yeah.
Read the motion aloud? Thank you. The board authorizes the general manager to enter into these tentative agreements as written, minus section 4.8, and SIU and/or ATU ratify such agreements minus section 4.8. She may execute them on behalf of the business.
So that's the motion.
So no vote?
Administration items.
Okay, we are now moving to the administration committee.
No vote.